Good evening. I'm Joseph Dobrian. Welcome to tonight's show. Last week we started reading one of my very favorite children's books. It's called The Magic Pudding, and it's an Australian story. It's about a koala named Bunyip Bluegum who wanders around the Australian outback with his friend Bill Barnacle the sailor and Sam Sawnoff the penguin bold and the magic pudding. And the pudding is magic because you can eat him, and there won't ever be any less of him. So that's a very handy thing when you're wandering around the Australian outback. Here you see the pudding wearing the basin on his head, and he's got very thin arms and legs, and the rest of him is just, it's a pudding. You can eat it whenever you like, as much of it as you like. So in the first chapter that we read last week, Bunyip has encountered these the sailor, the penguin, and the puddin', and they have made common cause and decided to partner up and wander around the outback. And of course, they would have to defend themselves against the puddin' thieves, the possum and the wombat, who are always trying to steal their puddin'. And so they have decided to form the Society of Puddin' Owners. So here they are, waking up bright and early the next morning, ready to begin the next chapter of their story. The Society of Puddin' Owners were up bright and early next morning, and they had the billy on and tea made before 6 o'clock, which is the best part of the day because the world has just had its face washed and the air smells like Pear's soap. "Aha," said Bill Barnacle, cutting up slices of the puddin'. "This is what I call grand. Here we are after a splendid night's sleep on dry leaves, having a smoking hot slice of steak and kidney for breakfast round the campfire. What could be more delightful?" "What indeed," said Bunyip Bluegum, sipping his tea. "Why, as I always say," said Bill, "if there's one thing more entrancing than sitting round a campfire in the evening, it's sitting round a campfire in the morning. No beds and blankets and breakfast tables for Bill Barnacle. For as I says in my breakfast ballad, if there's anything better than lying on leaves, it's rising from leaves at dawning. If there's anything better than sleeping at eve, it's waking up in the morning. If anything's better than campfire light, it's bright sunshine on waking. If there's anything better than puddin' at night, it's puddin' when day is breaking. If there's anything better than singing away when the stars are gaily shining, why, it's singing a song at dawn of day on puddin' for breakfast dining." There was a hearty round of applause at this song, for as Bunyip Bluegum remarked, singing at breakfast should certainly be more commonly indulged in, as it greatly tends to enliven what is on most occasions a somewhat dull proceeding. "One of the greatest advantages of being a professional puddin' owner," said Sam Sawnoff, "is that songs at breakfast are always encouraged. None of the ordinary breakfast rules, such as scowling while eating and saying the porridge is as stiff as glue and the eggs are as tough as leather, are observed. Instead, songs, roars of laughter, and boisterous jests are the order of the day. For example, this sort of thing," added Sam, doing a rapid backflip and landing with a thump on Bill's head. As Bill was unprepared for this act of boisterous humor, his face was pushed into the pudding with great violence, and gravy was splashed in his eye. And here you see what happened. Sam Sawnoff did a backflip and landed right smack on Bill's head and pushed his face right into the pudding. "What do you mean, playing such bungfoodling tricks on a man at breakfast?" roared Bill. "What do you mean?" shouted the puddin', "playing such food bungling tricks on a puddin' being breakfasted at?" "Breakfast humor, Bill, merely breakfast humor," said Sam. "Humor's humor," shouted Bill, "but puddin' in the whiskers is no joke." "Whiskers in the puddin' is worse than puddin' in the whiskers," shouted the puddin', standing up in his basin. And here you see, they're not very pleased. Here's Bill with gravy all over his face, and the puddin' standing up in his pot, looking very pissed off indeed. And my gosh, Bill is threatening to punch Sam in the beak there. "Observe the rules, Bill," said Sam hurriedly. "Boisterous humor at the breakfast table must be greeted with roars of laughter." "To Jerusalem with the rules," shouted Bill. "Pushing a man's face into his own breakfast is beyond rules or reason, and deserves a punch in the gizzard." Seeing matters arriving at this unpromising situation, Bunyip Bluegum interposed by saying, "Rather than allow this happy occasion to be marred by unseemly recriminations, let us, while admitting that our admirable friend Sam may have unwittingly disturbed the composure of our admirable friend Bill at the expense of our admirable Puddin's gravy, let us, I say, by the simple act of extending the hand of friendship, dispel in an instant these gathering clouds of disruption. In the words of the poem, then let the fist of friendship be kept for friendship's foes, ne'er let that hand in anger land on friendship's holy nose." These fine sentiments at once dispelled Bill's anger. He shook hands warmly with Sam, wiped the gravy from his face, and resumed breakfast with every appearance of hearty good humor. The meal over, the breakfast things were put away in the bag. Sam and Bill took the pudding between them, and all set off along the road, enlivening the way with song and story. Bill regaled them with portions of the Ballad of the Salt Junk Sarah, which is one of those songs that go on forever. Its great advantage, as Bill remarked, was that as it hadn't got an ending, it didn't need a beginning, so you could start it anywhere. As for instance, said Bill, and he roared out, "Ho aboard the Salt Junk Sarah, rollin' home across the line. The boatswain collared the captain's hat and threw it in the brine. Rollin' home, rollin' home, rollin' home across the foam. The captain sat without a hat the whole way rollin' home." And here you see it. The captain must have done something to annoy the boatswain, because the boatswain has just taken his hat and thrown it into the sea. And there's the helmsman having a good laugh at it while the captain looks outraged. Entertaining themselves in this way as they strolled along, they were presently arrested by shouts of "Fire! Fire!" and a fireman in a large helmet came bolting down the road, pulling a fire hose behind him. And there you see a fireman in a fireman's helmet pulling a hose behind him. "Aha," said Bill, "now we shall have the awe-inspiring spectacle of a fire to entertain us." And accosting the fireman, he demanded to know where the fire was. "The fact is," said the fireman, "that owing to the size of this helmet, I can't see where it is. But if you will kindly glance at the surrounding district, you'll see it about somewhere." They glanced about, and sure enough, there was a fire burning in the next field. It was only a cowshed, certainly, but it was blazing very nicely and well worth looking at. "Fire," said Bill, "in the form of a common cowshed, is burning about northeast as the crow flies." "In that case," said the fireman, "I invite all present to bravely assist in putting it out. But," he added impressively, "if you'll take my advice, you'll shove that puddin' in this hollow log and roll a stone again the end to keep him in. For if he gets too near the flames, he'll be cooked again and have his flavor ruined." "This is a very sensible fellow," said Bill, and though the puddin' objected strongly, he was at once pushed into a log and securely fastened in with a large stone. "How'd you like to be shoved in a bloomin' log," he shouted at Bill, "when you were burning with anxiety to see the fire?" But Bill said severely, "Be sensible, Albert. Fires is too dangerous to puddin's flavors." And here you see they're shoving the puddin into a hollow log as the fireman dictates. Somehow I don't think this is going to end well. No more time was lost in seizing the hose, and they set off with the greatest enthusiasm. For as everyone knows, running with the reel is one of the grand joys of being a fireman. They had the hose fixed to a garden tap in no time, and soon were all hard at work putting out the fire. And here you see Bill and Bunyip Bluegum and the fireman and Sam Sawnoff all running with the hose, running to get to the fire. Of course, there was a great deal of smoke and shouting and getting tripped up by the hose, and it was by the merest chance that Bunyip Bluegum glanced back in time to see the wombat in the act of stealing the puddin' from a hollow log. "Treachery is at work," he shouted. "Treachery," roared Bill, and with one blow on the snout knocked the fireman endways into the burning cinders, where his helmet fell off and exposed the countenance of that snouting scoundrel, the possum. And there you see Bill Barnacle punching the fireman, and the helmet flies off, and you see that it's the possum. Obviously, he was distracting Bill and Bunyip and Sam Sawnoff while the wombat went and stole the pudding. The possum, of course, hadn't expected to have his disguise pierced so swiftly, and though he managed to scramble out of the fire in time to save his bacon, he was considerably singed down the back. "What a murderous attack!" he exclaimed. "Oh, what a brutal attempt to burn a man alive!" And as some hot cinders had got down his back, he gave a sharp yell and ran off, singeing and smoking. Bill, distracted with rage, ran after the possum, then changed his mind and ran after the wombat, so that what with running first after one and then after the other, they both had time to get clean away and disappeared over the skyline. "I see it all," shouted Bill, casting himself down in despair. "Them low puddin' thieves has borrowed a fireman's helmet, collared a hose, and set fire to a cowshed in order to lure us away from the puddin'. The whole thing's as low put-up job as our noble credulity," said Sam, casting himself down beside Bill. "It's one of the most frightening things that ever happened," said Bill. "It's worse than treading on tacks with bare feet," said Sam. "It's worse than being caught stealing fowls," said Bill. "It's worse than being stood on by cows," said Sam. "It's almost as bad as having an uncle called Aldobranti Foscofornio," said Bill. And they both sang loudly, "It's worse than weevils, worse than warts, it's worse than corns to bear. It's worse than having several quarts of treacle in your hair. It's worse than beetles in the soup. It's worse than crows to eat. It's worse than wearing small-sized boots upon your large-sized feet. It's worse than kerosene to booze. It's worse than ginger hair. It's worse than anything to lose a puddin' rich and rare." Bunyip Bluegum reproved this despondency, saying, Come, this is no time for giving way to despair. Let us rather, by the fortitude of our bearing, prove ourselves superior to this misfortune, and with the energy of justly enraged men, pursue these malefactors, who have so richly deserved our vengeance. Arise! The grass is green, the day is fair, the dandelions abound. Is this a time for sad despair and sitting on the ground? Our puddin' in some darksome lair in iron chains is bound, while puddin' snatchers on him fare and eat him by the pound. Let gloom give way to angry glare, let weak despair be drowned, let vengeance in its rage declare our puddin' must be found. Then let's resolve to do and dare, let teeth with rage be ground, let voices to the heavens declare our puddin' must be found. Bravely spoken, said Bill, immediately recovering from his despair. Them gallant words has fired our blood, says Sam, and they both shook hands with Bunyip to show that they were now prepared to follow the call of vengeance. In order to investigate this dastardly outrage, said Bunyip, we must become detectives and find a clue. We must find someone who has seen a singed possum. Once traced to their lair, Mother Wit will suggest some means of rescuing our pudding. They set off at once after a brisk walk, came to a small house with a signboard on it saying, Henderson Hedgehog, horticulturist. Henderson himself was in the garden, horticulturing a cabbage, and they asked him if he had chanced to see a singed possum that morning. What's that? Said Henderson Hedgehog, and when they had repeated the question, he said, You must speak up, I'm a trifle deaf. Have you seen a singed possum? Shouted Bill. I can't hear you, said Henderson. Have you seen a singed possum? Roared Bill. To be sure, said Henderson, but the turnips are backward. Turnips be stewed, said Bill in such a tremendous voice that he blew his own hat off. Have you seen a singed possum? And here is Bill shouting so loud that his hat is flying off, trying to get Henderson Hedgehog to understand him. But Henderson is just too darn deaf. Good season for wattle blossoms, said Henderson. Well, yes, but a very poor season for carrots. A man might as well talk to a carrot as try and get sense out of that runt of a fellow, said Bill, disgusted. Come and see if we can't find someone that won't bust a man's vocal cords getting information out of. They left Henderson to his horticulturing and walked on till they met a parrot who was a swagman. or a swagman who was a parrot. He must have been one or the other, if not both, for he had a bag and a swag, and a beak and a billy, and a thundering bad temper into the bargain. And here you see him. There's the parrot with the swag on his back and the billy in his wing. And there are Bill Barnacle and Sam and Bunyip trying to interview him, trying to get some information out of him. The moment Bill asked him if he had met a singed possum, he shouted back, "Me eat a singed possum? I wouldn't eat a possum if he was singed, roasted, boiled, or fried." "Not et, met," shouted Bill. "I said met a singed possum." "Oh, why can't you speak plainly then?" said the parrot. "Have you got a fill of tobacco on you?" He took out his pipe and scowled at Bill. "Here you are," said Bill. "Cut and fill and answer the question." "All in good time," said the parrot, and he added to Sam, "You got any tobacco?" Sam handed him a fill, and he put it in his pocket. "You ain't got any tobacco," he said scornfully to Bunyip Bluegum. "I can see that at a glance. You're one of the non-smoking sort, all fur and feathers." "Here," said Bill angrily, "enough of this beating about the bush. Answer the question." "Don't be impatient," said the parrot. "Have you got a bit of tea and sugar on you?" "Here's your tea and sugar," said Bill, handing a little of each out of the bag, "and that's the last thing you get. Now, will you answer the question?" "What question?" "Have you seen a singed possum?" "No, I haven't," said the parrot, and he actually had the insolence to laugh in Bill's face. "Of all the swivel-eyed, up-jump, cross-grained sons of a cock-eyed tinker," exclaimed Bill, boiling with rage. "If punching parrots on the beak wasn't too painful for pleasure, I'd land you a sock-dolager on the muzzle that'd lay you out till Christmas. Come on, mates," he added. "It's no use wasting time over this low-down, hook-nosed tobacco grabber." And leaving the evil-minded parrot to pursue his evil-minded way, they hurried off in search of information. The next person they spied was a bandicoot carrying a watermelon. At first glance, you would have thought it was merely a watermelon walking by itself, but at second glance would have shown you that the walking was being done by a small pair of legs attached to the watermelon, and a third glance would have disclosed that the legs were attached to a bandicoot. You see? Looks like a walking watermelon. There's the melon with legs down below it, but there must be some sort of critter behind the watermelon carrying it, you would think. They shouted, "Hi, you with the melon," to attract his attention, and set off running after him, and the bandicoot, being naturally of a terrified disposition, ran for all he was worth. He wasn't worth much as a runner, owing to the weight of the watermelon, and they caught him up halfway across the field. Conceiving that his hour had come, the bandicoot gave a shrill squeak of terror and fell to his knees. "Take me, watermelon," he gasped, "but spare me life." And there you see the bandicoot down on his knees begging for mercy. There's the watermelon, and there is Sam and Bill and Bunyip. "Stuff and nonsense," said Bill. "We don't want your life. What we want is some information. Have you seen a singed possum about this morning?" "Singed possum, sir? Yes, sir. Certainly, sir," gasped the bandicoot, trembling violently. "What?" exclaimed Bill. "Do you mean to say you have seen a singed possum?" "Singed possums, yes, sir, gulped the bandicoot. "Very plentiful, sir, this time of year, sir, owing to the brush fires, sir." "Rubbish," said Bill. "I don't believe he's seen a singed possum at all." "Oh, no, sir," quavered the bandicoot. "Certainly not, sir. Wouldn't think of seeing singed possums if there was any objection, sir." "You're a poltroon," shouted Bill. "You're a slaverin', quaverin', melon-carrying nincompoop. There's no more chance of getting information out of you than out of a terrified turnip." Leaving the bandicoot to pursue his quavering, melon-humping existence, they set off again, Bill giving way to some very despondent expressions. "As far as I can see," he said, "if we can't find something better than stone-deaf hedgehogs, peevish parrots, and funkin' bandicoots, we may as well give way to despair." Bunyip Bluegum was forced to exert his finest oratory to inspire them to another frame of mind. "Let it never be said," he exclaimed, "that the unconquerable hearts of puddin' owners quailed before a parrot, a hedgehog, or a bandicoot. Let hedgehogs deaf go delve and dig, immune from loudest howl. Let bandicoots lump melons big, let peevish parrots prowl. Shall puddin' owners bow the head at such affronts as these? No, no, march on, by anger fed, our puddin' to release. Let courage high resolve inflame, our captive pud to free. Our banner wave, our words proclaim, we march to victory. Bravely sung, exclaimed Bill, grasping Bunyip Bluegum by the hand, and they proceeded with expressions of the greatest courage and determination. As a reward for this renewed activity, they got some useful information from a rooster who was standing at his front gate, looking up and down the road and wishing to heaven that somebody would come along for him to talk to. They got, in fact, a good deal more information than they asked for the rooster was one of those fine, upstanding, bumptious skites who love to talk all day in the heartiest manner to total strangers while their wives do the washing. And here you see the rooster smoking his pipe, and there in the background you see his wife who's doing her washing while he just stands out there at his front gate waiting for somebody to come along to talk to. Singed possum, he exclaimed when they had put the usual question to him. Now, what an extraordinary thing that you should come along and ask me that question. What an astounding and incredible thing that you should actually use the word singed in connection with the word possum. Though, mind you, the word I had in mind was not singed, but burning, and not possum, but feathers. Now, I'll tell you why. Only this morning, as I was standing here, I said to myself, somebody's been burning feathers. I called out at once to the wife, fine woman, the wife, you'll meet her presently, have you been burning feathers? No, she says. Well, said I, if you haven't been burning feathers, somebody else has. And the very moment that I'm repeating the word feathers and burning, you come along and repeat the words singed and possum. Instantly, I call to mind that at the identical moment that I smelled something burning, I saw a possum passing this very gate, though whether he happened to be singed or not, I didn't inquire. Which way did he go? Inquired Bill excitedly. Now let me see, said the rooster. He went down the road, turned to the right, gave a jump and a howl, and set off in the direction of Watkin Wombat's summer residence. The very man we're after, shouted Bill, and bolted off down the road, followed by the others, without taking any notice of the rooster's request to wait a minute and be introduced to the wife. His wife may be all right, said Bill as they ran, but what I say is blow meeting a bloomin' old rooster's wife when you haven't got a year to waste listening to a bloomin' old rooster. They followed the rooster's directions with the utmost rapidity and came to a large hollow tree with a door in the side and the notice board nailed up which said, Watkin Wombat, Esquire, summer residence. The door was locked, but it was clear that the puddin' thieves were inside, because they heard the possum say peevishly, You're eating too much, and here's me, most severely singed, not getting sufficient. And the wombat was heard to say, What you want is soap. But the possum said angrily, What I need is immense quantities of puddin'. The avengers drew aside to hold a consultation. What's to be done, said Bill. It's no use knocking because they'd look through the keyhole and refuse to come out. And not being burglars, we can't bust the door in. It seems to me there's nothing for it but to give way to despair. Never give way to despair while whiskers can be made from dry grass, said Bunyip Bluegum, and suiting the action to the word, he swiftly made a pair of fine mustaches out of dried grass and stuck them on with wattle gum. Now lend me your hat, he said to Bill, and taking the hat, he turned up the brim, dented in the top, and put it on. The bag is also required, he said to Sam, and taking that in his hand and turning his coat inside out, he stood before them completely disguised. And here is Bunyip Bluegum in disguise, with Bill's hat on and the false mustache. You'd never recognize him, right? You two, he said, must remain in hiding behind the tree. You will hear me knock, accost the ruffians, and hold them in conversation. The moment you hear me exclaim loudly, Hey presto, pots and pans, you will dart out and engage the villains at fisticuffs. The rest leave to me. Waiting till the others were hidden behind the tree, Bunyip rapped smartly on the door, which opened presently, and the wombat put his head out cautiously. "Have I the extreme pleasure of addressing Watkin Wombat, Esquire?" inquired Bunyip Bluegum with a bow. And here we see Bunyip Bluegum knocking on the door of Watkin Wombat's summer residence, which is a hollow tree. And Watkin Wombat is sticking his head out very cautiously. And there are Bill Barnacle and Sam Sawnoff getting ready to take care of business. Of course, seeing a perfect stranger at the door, the wombat had no suspicions and said at once, "Such is the name of him you see before you." "I've called to see you," said Bunyip, "on a matter of business. The commodity which I vend is Poodle's patent puddin' enlarger, samples of which I have in the bag. As a guarantee of good faith, we are giving samples of our famous enlarger away to all well-known puddin' owners. The enlarger, one of the wonders of modern science, has but to be poured over the puddin with certain necessary incantations, and the puddin will be instantly enlarged to double its normal size." He took some sugar from the bag and held it up. "I am now about to hand you some of this wonderful discovery. But," he added impressively, "the operation of enlarging the puddin is a delicate one, and must be performed in the open air. Produce your puddin, and I will at once apply Poodle's patent with marvelous effect." "Of course, it's understood that no charge is to be made," said the possum, hurrying out. "No charge whatever," said Bunyip Bluegum. So, on the principle of always getting something for nothing, as the wombat said, the puddin was brought out and placed on the ground. "Now watch me closely," said Bunyip Bluegum. He sprinkled the puddin with sugar, made several passes with his hands, and pronounced these words: "Who incantation utters, he generally mutters his gruesome blasts and bans. But I, you need not doubt it, prefer aloud to shout it. Hey presto, pots and pans!" And here you see Bunyip doing his incantations over the puddin. And there's the possum and the wombat waiting. And there are Bill and Sam just ready to jump out and kick their butts. And when Bunyip gave him the high sign, which is, "Hey presto, pots and pans," out sprang Bill and Sam and set about the puddin' thieves like a pair of windmills, giving them such a clip-clap clouting and a flip-flap flouting that what with being punched and pounded and clipped and clapped, they had only enough breath left to give two shrieks of despair while scrambling back into Watkin Wombat's summer residence and banging the door behind them. The three friends had puddin' secured in no time, and shook hands all around, congratulating Bunyip Bluegum on the success of his plan. "Your noble actin'," said Bill, "has saved our puddin's life." "Them puddin' thieves," said Sam, "was children in your hands." "Oh, we hear ye," sang out the possum, and the wombat added, "Oh, what deceit." "Enough of you two," shouted Bill. "If we catch you sneaking after our puddin' again, you'll get such a beltin' that you'll wish you was vegetarians. And now," said he, "for a glorious reunion round the campfire." And a glorious reunion they had, tucking into hot steak and kidney puddin' and boiled jam roll, which, after the exertions of the day, went down, as Bill said, grand. And that's enough for tonight. Thanks very much for watching.